strategies and concepts discussed are for educational purposes only and do not represent specific investment, tax, or estate planning advice. Investing carries an inherent element of risk, and it is in everyone's best interest to consult a tax, legal, or investment professional. Beth Williams is an investment advisor representative of, and advisory services are offered through USA Financial Securities Corp., a registered investment advisor. Megan Carney, Megan S. Carney P. LLC, and Financial Arc Builders are not affiliated with USA Financial Securities Corp.
Welcome to Money Healing. I'm your co-host, Beth Williams.
And I'm your other co-host, Megan Carney. We're here to talk about money and our feelings related to it. I'm a psychologist who specializes in helping sensitive people.
And I'm a financial planner. We both talk to everyday people just like you about these topics.
Everyone's mental health and money health journeys are so different. And as unique as we all are, there are some common themes when it comes to how our emotions impact our money and vice versa.
And it's those common themes that we are going to be discussing together, both the themes themselves and some ideas from us about how to move forward and heal your relationship with money. In the next bit of episodes, Megan and I will be unpacking the various emotions and trauma themes that we've encountered within our observations over the last few years.
We discovered that people fell into one of two camps, one that knows their numbers and where they are financially, and those that don't know their numbers and where they are financially. We recommend that you go through the episodes and listen to the ones you believe may apply to you.
Megan and I are big advocates for getting collaborative support for both your mental health and your financial health journey. As you listen, we recommend that you pay attention to yourself, your reactions emotionally, and reach out to either a mental health professional and or a financial professional to help you deal with your relationship with money.
We'll begin by discussing I don't know my numbers and blank. Is there something that comes after that? Emotional themes we'll discuss within that will be fear, avoidance. What happens if I lose or fail? Shame, guilt, and even domestic violence and abuse, with the overarching theme of trauma.
We will then discuss I know my numbers and blank. Some of the emotional themes that we'll discuss within that will be hopelessness, fear, shame, embarrassment, burnout, never enough, feeling lost, undervalued, worry, and then we'll also deal with the overarching theme of trauma. Welcome back to Money Healing. For this episode, we're going to be starting to talk about I know my numbers, or I feel like I know where I am financially, and I don't get financial help. And specifically for this episode, we're going to be talking about I feel like I have too much debt. And Megan, for me at least, I have this one quote from Susie Orman that I love, and it goes back to you spend more when you feel less than. And I think that that's so accurate when it comes to just why we're spending and what we're spending things on. Not that that's the only way that debt comes into our lives, but often it is. It does seem like we're spending more than our budget allows because we feel like we're less than worthy of it or something.
That's certainly one of many ways I would say that we come into debt is because, yeah, it's like trying to fill this hole of like feeling good enough, presentable enough, like the old keeping up with the Joneses thing. I remember when I started a particular money coaching program that I did for therapists, one of the first tasks that they have you do is go to a coffee shop and give $10 to just pay it forward and go sit in a corner somewhere and just notice your emotional reactions to seeing the person receive it, the pay it forward, and with specific instructions of like not having to make the other person feel like they need to pay it forward as well. They encourage you to go to like a fancier coffee place where you wouldn't normally go, that's maybe above your usual price range. just to see like all of the feelings and stuff that come up. And I remember I drive like an '07 Chevy. It's doing great still, so no reason to replace it. But I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to this like fancy coffee shop and I'm gonna park right out front and get out of like my beater looking car and do this. Like I had so much feeling about that because I felt ashamed that like I didn't have a nicer car. And by the time it was over, I was like, oh, that was so not a big deal at all. I am certainly not the only one with an older car. But that's that idea of like why we spend more is because we don't want to feel that. We don't want to be with those uncomfortable feelings.
We'll unpack a little bit of that from a psychological standpoint about how to deal with those emotions. But from a financial standpoint, I think that it's really important to define things like debt. And we thought that we'd just take a little bit of time to unpack that and explain that. So debt is arguably the most powerful financial tool in existence, because basically just by your name and a couple of pieces of data, we give you a whole bunch of money. And it's really, I mean, could be that a credit card or a personal loan or even a house. There's lots and lots of different tools around that kind of thing, but it's a very powerful financial tool just because of that application kind of process. Credit, specifically like credit cards, or I'm getting credit, which is really what's happening. That comes from a Latin word that means I believe. So in this instance, from a financial standpoint, and especially from a personal financial standpoint, it's basically saying, I don't have the money now, but I believe in the future I will. And often what ends up happening, though, is that we end up filling up more just because there's that space available, like on a credit card, where, oh, I can max it beyond this limit. And so that's a little bit different than just like, I believe, and therefore it's going to stay the same. Oftentimes it doesn't. So from a financial standpoint, when I'm looking at someone's debt and they're coming to me, especially with credit cards, I hear a lot of shame and a lot of fear and a lot of confusion about how I'm not supposed to have this. Oftentimes, for me at least, broad picture overview, if I'm looking at debt, as a financial advisor, I'm less concerned about the debt that you have, and I'm more concerned about why do we have the debt. So for instance, if you're spending more on a credit card to support a lifestyle that you can't afford, that's not a great debt to have. If you are having to go into credit card debt because you had a family emergency and you had to fly out and you didn't have the cash available at the time, that's just some of the things that happen. So for me, that's what I'm looking for, is I'm looking for what is it that we actually are trying to spend money on and why does the debt exist? Debt-free in our industry does not mean that you don't have any debt. Debt is just a tool, just like money is just a tool. Granted, it can get overwhelming and it can get out of control really quick and that kind of thing, but it's just a tool. And when I'm looking at somebody and I'm saying that they're debt-free, it's because we're looking at their entire net worth. For most of us, when we started learning about money, we said, I've got money coming in, $1,000 comes in, $800 goes out for expenses, and whatever's left over is $200. And then we end up getting a pay raise. So then it's, $2,000 is coming in. It doesn't remain at the 800 going out. It usually goes up. So 1,200 goes out or whatever. And then we've got money left over. And that's just income expenses. That's where budgeting comes in. And that's a very important piece of understanding money, but it's not the whole picture. And when we're looking at somebody's financial health or where they're at financially right now, we're looking at what their assets are, what do I own, versus their liabilities, what I owe, and then that comes into net worth. And if you have the net worth, basically for this, when we're saying you have debt free or you're debt free, what we're saying is it's not that you don't have any debt, it's that you could pay off the debt at any time.
It really makes me think about the episode that we did in the past about values. right? Which, by the way, if you haven't watched that, go back and watch that one. Like, if there is one that I want everyone to watch, it is the values episode. But what you're speaking to is like, is the reason that you're in debt or have some debt aligned with your values and goals?
And I think that there's good debt and bad debt. A good debt might be a student loan. You know, you can't do certain jobs without a degree. And so if you need to go into debt to be able to get that job, then that might be a good debt. Again, I think it depends on everybody individually, but that would be an example of something that's a good debt versus a bad debt of I'm trying to buy everybody dinner because I feel like I'm supposed to, or I want $15 or $30 cocktails. That would be like a bad debt. Where I don't really understand why you would go into debt for that, but it does exist. And so that is part of that. Or am I trying to support a lifestyle that I can't afford versus am I trying to pay for something that's going to be better in the future? Another example would be, here in the United States, medical bills. Medical debt is a huge reason for bankruptcy. And if you have to go into medical debt or you have to pay, for a medical procedure and go into debt because of that, arguably that's a good debt too. I mean, it depends on, again, what you're doing or the situation, but if it's a life-saving procedure, then it's probably the right thing to do. And that would just be another example of me looking at why does the debt occur and why is it existing, and less about the fact that you have credit card debt.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a piece of like the good debt, bad debt, like labeling it that way that I don't know, it doesn't sit quite right with me. And I think it's perhaps because of different perspectives, right? What is good debt to me might seem like bad debt to somebody else because of that difference in values, right? Maybe there is somebody who's like, no, the $30 cocktail is getting me in the room with certain people who are absolutely, I'm betting, going to just skyrocket my business, right? They're going to get me connected to the right people. And so that $30 cocktail for that person might be worth it.
Mm-hmm. And that just goes back to that quote from Susie Orman that I love so much of you spend more than when you feel less than. And so if you're recognizing the emotions that are coming up and you're going, oh, you know what, it's because I feel less than or I feel inadequate. So I guess on that point, Megan, if you're dealing with, for me, I hear these things like fear and shame and guilt around debt and just all of these big emotions. What do you do when you're starting to feel those things?
Well, we have to make space for them, just like any other feeling, right? We have to listen to what's the story behind each of those feelings. Whose voice am I hearing that's potentially nudging me towards those feelings? What am I saying to myself that's making me feel those things? Because our thoughts and our feelings are almost always connected. Then once we've like asked ourselves those things, figured some of that out, we can dig a little bit deeper and say like, well, is that really true? So we get to ask ourselves like, where is all of this coming from? Is it really that realistic? Do I need to feel this about having some debt? Other debts, like when I've perhaps built up a little bit of credit card debt because I'm trying something new in my business and I'm betting that eventually this is going to work. It's worth this debt because there's no other way to do it. Like you need money to have money to make money. This is the best way to do it right now. That feels a little bit scary. There has in the past for me certainly been some shame about it. But the shame I realized was other people's stories. It wasn't mine. I think it's important that bottom line, we're being practical and acknowledging the emotional side of this, right? So we are practically looking at the numbers, so we have a good sense of like, is it realistic that this will all be okay? Not just blind faith. So we look at that to help inform, because we don't want to be driven just by emotions on either side, right? Whether we're driven into not creating debt, which is a whole different thing, about shame and fear and guilt. We don't want to be completely driven by that. We want to have the reality, which is why it's so great to have a financial advisor, of like what things look like. And we also don't want those feelings of like, oh, I have to keep up. I'm not looking the part. I'm not good enough. I need to show that I am good enough by buying all these things and spending all this money, and totally ignoring the numbers either. So whatever the reason is why you came into too much debt, you can get out of it. And now being in debt is the time, I would say, to be getting some help financially, because you will have somebody who's not all caught up in all of those feelings to root you in some practical realities of what the numbers are, and potentially have hope for you, which I believe leads into our next episode, right, Beth?
It kind of exactly does. Yeah. So our next episode is going to be unpacking, I feel like I know my numbers and where I am financially, and it feels like it's hopeless anyways. So join us for this next one, and we'll see you there.